In 1858, Django, a slave, is chained to a bunch of other slaves and being marched to his new owner's estate in Texas by the Speck Brothers. At nightfall, a German man in a dentist cart pulls up and hails the Speck Brothers. He introduces himself as Dr. King Schultz. Schultz is clearly more intelligent and enlightened than the Specks. He says he is looking for a slave who can identify a band of wanted fugitives known as the Brittle Brothers. Django announces that he knows the Brittle Brothers and can identify them. Schultz offers to buy Django, but his polite and educated manner rubs the ill-mannered Specks the wrong way, and Ace Speck threatens to shoot him with his shotgun. In response, Schultz lowers his lantern, whips out a revolver, and shoots Ace, then Dickie's horse, causing Dickie to fall off his horse. The horse carcass then lands on and crushes Dickie's leg, leaving him screaming in pain. Crippled, he agrees to sell Django, and Schultz pays the man, gets an official title to Django, and prepares to ride off. Before Schultz leaves, however, he frees the remaining slaves clearly. Schultz finds slavery abhorrent and says that they may either carry the remaining Speck brother back to town or shoot him and flee. As Django and Schultz ride off, we hear Speck pleading for his life. We hear a gunshot and can see blood splatter as Dickie's brains are blown out. Django and Schultz arrive in the small town of Daughtray near El Paso. As they travel through the streets, townspeople stop to stare in disbelief at the sight of a black man on a horse, much to Schultz's confusion. As Schultz ties his cart down at a hitching post, he checks some papers to make sure he's in the right place. The two then walk into a saloon despite the fact that Django is forbidden from doing so because of the South's segregation laws. When Schultz insists on being served, the barkeep runs out of the saloon, Schultz calling after him to specifically bring the sheriff, not the town marshal. While they wait, Schultz pours beers for himself and Django and leaves money on the bar. He explains that he is no longer a dentist, but a bounty hunter in search of the Brittle Brothers who are wanted dead or alive. He admits that although he knows the general location of the brothers, near Gatlinburgh, they have adopted aliases, and he needs somebody who can identify them. Schultz tells Django that if he helps him bring in the Brittle Brothers, Schultz will give him his freedom, pay him a $75 share of the reward, and let him keep his horse. Django immediately agrees when, as if on cue, Schultz sees the sheriff coming down the sidewalk. The sheriff enters the saloon, shotgun in hand, and tells Schultz and Django to leave. The two comply and exit out the swinging doors. Sheriff asks them why they are coming into his town. Schultz is silent, then steps forward. He shoots the sheriff in the stomach. The townspeople are stunned as the sheriff stumbles to the ground. Schultz walks around the wounded sheriff, aims his derringer, and shoots him in the head, killing him. Schultz looks up and tells the bartender that now is the time to fetch the marshal. The bartender runs off while Schultz and Django go back into the saloon to wait. The town marshal and most of the town arrive and train rifles on the front door of the saloon. Schultz hears that he has 100 rifles aimed at his head and gets the marshal to agree to not have him shot dead like a dog in the street when he comes out. Schultz then exits, hands raised over his head and a paper in his hand. He announces to the marshal and to the assembled townsfolk what has really happened, that the dead man the people of Daughtray saw fit to elect as their sheriff, who went by the name of Bill Sharp, is a wanted cattle rustler named Willard Peck with a $200 bounty on his head. Schultz says that the paper in his hand is an official document from a judge that charges King with finding and bringing Peck back to the proper jurisdiction dead or alive. Schultz then suggests that the marshal pay him the $200 fee. Later, while camping, Django admits to Schultz that what he wants to do once he is liberated is buy freedom for his wife, a slave girl named Broomhilda von Shaft, who had been a servant of a German mistress before being sold into slavery in the US. Their owner Carrican was a cruel old man who disapproved of their marriage, so the pair attempted escape. They were caught by the Brittle Brothers, who tortured and branded them both with the mark of a runaway, a small R on their right cheeks. Carrican then directed the Brittle Brothers to sell the pair to separate owners and to take the lowest price for Django. Django and Schultz eventually develop a plan to infiltrate an estate near Gatlinburgh where they suspect that the Brittle Brothers reside and for Django to identify them. Django is to act as a freed slave who has been hired as Schultz's valet. They arrive at the plantation owned by Spencer Big Daddy Bennett. Schultz states he is looking to buy one of Bennett's slave girls for an exorbitant price. As he and Bennett talk business, Django is given free range to look around the estate. Django asks Bettina, his escort, if she knows of the Brittles. Bettina admits that she doesn't know them, leading Django to suspect that the Brittles are using a false name. At this, Bettina reveals that 3 overseer brothers known as the Schaefers did arrive in the past year. She points out the first one in the field. Django looks through his telescope and sees that it is Ellis. Seeing Ellis causes Django to have a lengthy flashback over running away with Broomhilda and pleading with Big John to spare Broomhilda from the whip, unsuccessfully. The flashback ends with Big John saying, "I like the way you beg, boy." Snapping out of his flashback, Django learns that Big John and Little Raj are on a different part of the plantation, about to whip a young slave girl for breaking eggs. The two have tied her to a tree by the arms, and Big John is about to use the whip on her when Django appears and shouts Big John's name. Big John turns, stunned to see Django, who suddenly produces a derringer similar to Schultz's and shoots him through a Bible page glued to his shirt. He looks down at his bullet wound, stunned, as Django tells him, "I like the way you die, boy," and Big John pitches forward, dead. Little Raj attempts to grab his revolver, but Django grabs Big John's whip and uses it to beat him unconscious. He then takes the gun and unloads it into Little Raj, just as Schultz comes racing in. Django tells Schultz that Ellis is already galloping away across the cotton field. Schultz tracks Ellis through his sniper rifle, and once Django says he is sure he is right, Schultz fires. Blood sprays the cotton flowers as Ellis falls off his horse, a bullet in his chest. Though Bennett is incensed when he arrives, he is forced to let them go once Schultz explains they are legally authorized to kill and collect these men. That night, out for revenge, Bennett calls out all the fellow white men of the plantation to kill Django and Schultz, spotting their dentist's cart camped outside of town. The men make their charge over the hill in KKK-style masks and surround the small campsite. The scene then changes to earlier, when Bennett is giving instructions to the other Klansmen to not shoot Django or Schultz unless they are shot at. He puts his bag hood on, and a funny scene ensues as Bennett finds he is unable to see through the eye holes in his mask. Everyone else starts to bicker about how badly made their masks are, which ends with Willard, whose wife Jenny spent all afternoon making masks for them, giving up and riding away, furious. Eventually, the Klansmen get their act together. As they surround the cart, one of the men spots what he thinks is Django and Schultz hiding under the cart. Schultz says, "Off with him," and fires at the cart, setting off a bundle of dynamite hidden in the tooth on the roof of his cart. It blows up and kills most of the Klansmen. Bennett manages to survive the detonation and begins riding away. Schultz sees this and hands the rifle over to Django, letting him do the honors. Django tracks and then fires, hitting Bennett and shooting him off his horse. Schultz realizes that Django is a formidable natural sharpshooter. King asks what Django will do now that he is officially free, and Django says he will locate his wife believed to be in Mississippi and try to purchase her freedom. King, who has bonded with Django and is impressed by both his intelligence and marksmanship, proposes to help Django rescue his wife if Django will work with him over the winter in collecting bounties. King is also impressed with Broomhilda's name and her ability to speak German, telling Django the German legend of Siegfried and Brunhild. In the legend, the beautiful Brunhild is captured and imprisoned in a tower on a mountainside that is guarded by a dragon and surrounded by hellfire. Her lover, Siegfried, rescues her, facing the mountain and dragon simply because he is brave, but also overcoming the hellfire out of his love for Brunhild. Django is quite taken with the tale. Django agrees to King's proposal, finding him to be a deeply honorable man in spite of his line of work. King trains Django to not only be an expert with a gun, but also how to read and present himself in public. On one mission, Django and King perch themselves on a hill overlooking a small farm, where Django hesitates to kill a man who is now peacefully working on the farm and has a son. King explains that before the man owned this farm and started a family, he murdered several people while robbing stagecoaches, and that he has a $7,000 bounty on his head. King explains that it is this own man's actions in a dirty world that has brought the bounty hunters to his door. Hearing this, Django shoots and kills the man in front of his son. King tells him to keep the wanted poster, as a bounty hunter's first successful poster is good luck. Throughout the winter, Django imagines he and Broomhilda free and happy. Jumping forward to March 1859, once winter passes, the two head back to the south in search of Broomhilda.